I have this slide in here because if I didn't, I would forget. So I want to thank you all for this beautiful, beautiful polo shirt that I got here with the resource assistance program and everything that Linda and I are sporting. Much, much, much appreciated. And I also want to, to thank the leaders of this program for inviting us again and again, which frankly, like Linda said, we look forward to it. We look forward to working together, and we look forward to coming and sharing with you all. And I also want to thank my fellow, especially after spending a week with them. I have some awesome colleagues in the CMPC team. And I think, Linda, you would agree that everybody is fabulous. There's not a single clunker. There's not a single clunker among us. So I want to thank all of them. So many of them have reached out and helped me when I needed assistance or had questions or didn't know how to do something. And I've had the opportunity to, to reciprocate at times as well. And it's a great feeling that you get when you feel like when you need help, somebody's there for you. And it's nice to be able to be there for other folks too. I also want to thank our management. Rhonda Thomas is the best manager I've ever had. And I suspect one of the very best, if not the very best, in the entire Forest Service. And I told her bosses that they should be utilizing her to do training for supervisors as to how you empower your staff while still holding them accountable. Anyway, I could go on, but I'm gonna try not to. All right. So I also want to thank Rhonda's boss, Eric Adelano, and then the the folks further up the chain of command, including Mary Pletcher Rice, I believe, who is Eric's boss and the head of the WEPO, the Work Environment and Performance Office, and then going up to Angela Coleman, the associate deputy chief, or I'm not exactly sure what her name is, but she's below the chief. And then, Chief Randy Moore. All of them have been so supportive of our program and the work that we do that I feel like I would be reticent to not express appreciations for them when I have an opportunity. All right, and I want to thank all of you for coming, engaging, and I look forward to hearing some of your answers to some of my questions. So next slide, please. I am not going to repeat the stuff Linda said. So next slide, please. But I have it all on my slide deck because sometimes when I do this presentation, Linda's not there to kick it off for me. So I've got to make sure that I've got the info as well. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Now, if I had been wise and smart and with it and young, I would have just deleted these slides for this presentation, but nobody's perfect. We're all works in progress, including me. So it is what it is. Linda covered this, so next slide, please. All right, now we're getting to the part that I know about. The Jackson Craft model. What the heck is that? Well, you probably won't find it in any training or anything except for the one that I'm delivering. But what I'm going to share about the Jackson Craft model is what it is, why I did it, how I developed it, and how I have been using it and how it can be used by you. What you can do with the model is I want you to take whatever resonates for you and add it to your conflict management toolkit. Whether you know it or not, we all have a conflict management toolkit. Something that was developed through our experiences, our upbringing, our education, our interactions with folks. There's a book and a podcast called Your Body Keeps the Score. It's so true. I think it's more related to trauma and that type of thing. But, conflict can be very traumatic for folks. And even those of us who might be conflict averse, or we avoid it at all costs. And let me just say this, if you're a conflict avoider, welcome to the Forest Service. There's a whole lot of conflict avoiders at the Forest Service. There's a thing that a friend of mine who's a life coach has shared with me, which is whatever you resist persists. The way that shows up in conflict is when you suppress things and you push them down and push them down and push them down, they never stay down. They usually erupt at some point in time because of that pressure of pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. And usually when they erupt, it's at the absolute worst possible time, and it's over the least impactful thing. It's like some little thing causes that eruption, and then all the angst and stuff that you've had that you've been pushing down comes out, and it's usually not helpful. Not only is it not helpful, it usually creates even more of a conflict situation that needs to be dealt with. So for any of you who've had any experience with the fire is a big thing here in the Forest Service, right? Working on fire teams, supporting fire, doing all that. Well, if you think about it through the fire analogy, there is the, when a wildfire is raging, we need to send the smoke jumpers in, and we need to, do the suppression work or whatever in order to get things back under control. A lot of times people look at conflict management as that, smoke jumper, fire suppression team that's going to come in and help management or whoever deal with whatever conflict is going on. But the model that we actually prefer, the model that is better, is the one that's more proactive. That's the one that includes training folks for not having big wildfires, right? Like don't smoke and then toss your, the butt of your cigarette, into the forest or into the brush or whatever. Don't do that. How about doing some thinning work or some fuels work or whatever in order to prepare? There it is. Jenna says prevention is worth twice the cure. Absolutely. So if you can do stuff in advance, and we like to do that through training, right? We like to do that through training. We like to do that sometimes through conflict coaching. Sometimes we do that through our consultations. We want to be wildfire prevention specialists as opposed to wildfire suppression specialists. And so doing these kinds of things, and especially in new employee orientations, with folks that may not have as much experience with the Forest Service, if we can give you all some helpful tools, tips, and techniques, then we can save everybody some hassle down the road. You're just using what you've got in your conflict management toolkit. In my experience, and I need to update my my bio, because I think I said 1,000, and it's easily 2,000 or 3,000 for me. But I remember I'm older, so I got a lot of years under the belt. But communication is an aspect of every conflict I've ever heard of at some level. But unmet expectations is the root of almost all conflict and all dysfunction. Unmet expectations. And it's usually not just the unmet expectations of one party. It's usually unmet expectations of all the parties. Okay, so I think I told you that I was going to tell you why I did this, how I did it, and all of that in the previous slide. Don't need to go back. But then this slide reminds me that I didn't do that yet. So let me do that. I was working at another federal agency prior to coming to work for the fabulous Forest Service. And in that other agency, I had two jobs. One of the jobs was I was the Equal Employment Opportunity um, informal complaint lead counselor. So when people had EEO complaints or wanted to file an EEO complaint, they go through the informal complaint process first before they then have an opportunity to go through the formal complaint process. So I was the manager of that informal complaint process. And in the informal complaint processes, one of the things that we try to do is to help people by using alternative dispute resolution techniques to work through whatever the issue is. And so I had opportunities to do that. And I was also the alternative dispute resolution coordinator for the entire agency. So as happens in not just the Forest Service, but other agencies as well, you often end up with more than one job, even though you only get paid for one. Okay. And that was my situation at the time. And so I was looking for ways to strategize and be more productive and effective and efficient with, the limited time that I had when I was doing ADR work. So I realized that I was spending a lot of time helping people figure out, so what was the root of their issue, not what the issue was. I'm mad at so-and-so because they didn't give me the promotion and they gave it to so-and-so. That might be the actual position. But why is that important? We have a lot of things that happen to us on a regular basis in our work lives and in our personal lives where it's just not that big. It's not a big enough of a deal for us to get worked up, upset, and feel like we need to do something about it. A lot of things we just kind of let go because it doesn't matter, it's not that important or whatever. And yet there are some things that, because of our own values or core values or beliefs about things, it annoys us to the point of distraction. If we don't do something about this, Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt, or maybe I should say Mount St. Helens is going to erupt. And it's a big deal. And I found that a lot of times people knew what they were upset about, but they had not always given much thought as to why it was such a big deal. So what I started doing is I started keeping track, literally keeping track for every case that I had for about a year and a half, 2 years, every case that I had where I was working with somebody. I wasn't keeping track of what the positions were, what the thing is that they were mad about, but I was keeping track of what the underlying interest was. Why did it matter so much? Where did they have a need that was not being met? And so I literally had a piece of butcher paper on the back of my office door. And when somebody would leave, I would make a notation on there about what the underlying interest was beneath the positions that they were taking for their conflict. And then I kept track of those until I had filled up the page. Like I said, it took about a year and a half or 2 years. And I had, I don't know, 150 or so cases in that time. And one thing became apparent. There were 5 things that came up most often, because I would write the thing down and then I would put a check mark anytime that there was another person who had that thing. There were 5 things that came up far and away more than all of the other things combined. And those 5 things are the CRAFT acronym items. The communication was, like I said, that is in every single one. Respect, appreciation, and I also include recognition as a part of appreciation, fairness, and I'm including equity in the fairness, and then trust. Those were the 5 things that, it was a big divide between those and everything else. Now, I'm not saying that they were in this order, but they were the 5 things. And then I realized, hey, I can make an acronym out of this that I can remember. And then when I'm working with people and they can't identify what the underlying stuff is as to why it's such a big deal, where their needs aren't being met, I can just start asking them questions around these CRAFT acronyms. So where in the whatever conflict you've got going on has communication shown up as an issue? Is it good, or are there challenges? If there are challenges, tell me about them. And then ask the same questions for respect, appreciation, recognition, fairness, equity, and trust. And what I came to discover is every single conflict, of the thousands that I've had, and talking to other practitioners as well, they one or more, I would say two or more of these always come up as a thing. They always come up. And so if that's the case, then I could certainly help people and reduce some of the amount of time I spend, digging for this stuff by just asking them questions about it. And guess what? All of you can do the exact same thing. You can do it for yourselves, and you can do it for other people. If you're in a situation where somebody's coming to you and they're going on and on about things, and you're like, well, so what, right? Where's the thing? And then you can ask them these questions and find out and help them identify where the need is that they have that really needs to be met, that isn't being met. All right, so as I'm going to go through and address each of these individually, and then I'm going to ask each of you for examples. And when I say each of you, I don't mean every single one of you needs to reply, but I'm going to ask you to raise your hands, and then I'm going to ask for examples, either in your own life or example that you've observed. And feel free not to use something, from the place that you're working right now, where somebody might hear about it or see it, or don't use any personal identification information either. But I'm going to want to hear some examples, because then we can talk about that. All right, so I'm reordering these because if I just went with started with communication, we'd run out of time. I wouldn't have a chance to get to the other ones. So I always like to start with the other ones and then come back to communication until we run out of time. All right, here's respect. Respect, it connects all of us at a personal level. It reflects an attitude that's developed from deep listening and understanding, cultural and personal sensitivity, and compassion and empathy. Respect honors all the participants in an interaction by creating a safe place to have difficult conversations, and respect leads to an environment of honesty and mutual trust. I want to have somebody share an example of where, they felt respect, or they saw it demonstrated, or where they didn't. All right, Rachel Lynette, tell me what's up.
So when I moved into my bunkhouse, I have an emotional support animal with me, a cat, and I was getting a new roommate, and I had spoken with her beforehand, and she put the cat in my room before she started opening the door to move her things in and leaving it open. And so had I jumped to conclusions when I saw the open door that she was letting my cat out, I would have been completely. So I think her respect begot more respect from me. I think because she had the respect to put the cat away and she had been receptive in our earlier conversations, I was then inclined to reciprocate.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Thank you. All right, so this next one is appreciation. I also call that recognition at times. Be thinking about this. I am going to come to you all attendees again for an example of where you felt like appreciation was demonstrated, or where you felt like it wasn't demonstrated. And recognition is, the same thing. They're appreciation / recognition. Here's the thing about appreciation and recognition. Remember this quote: different strokes for different folks. Appreciation and recognition for some people can be as simple as, you know what, I don't really want any big show, right? I don't, just thank me personally, thank me privately. I'm good with that. Other people, they want a brass band, an audio-visual presentation, a big a stage with a podium, highlights of their life or whatever they did, somebody introducing them and talking really nice about them, kind of like what we got. And then at the end, they get to share a few words, and maybe there's a plaque or a trophy or something, I used to, in one of my prior jobs at this other agency, I was the manager of the payroll office and the manager of the travel office. Again, 2 jobs, 1 check. One of my payroll staff was extraordinary, and the work that they did was outstanding. Customers were really, really pleased. And we had this incentive thing where people could give like gift certificates to somebody who provided really good service. And this employee got more gift certificates than all the rest of my 14 staff combined. However, this employee did not like a big show. They did not want to, be recognized this way. So I had to alter my desire to want to recognize. I did make comments at the, at our staff meetings, because, I wanted to empower my other staff, right? To go and do likewise. But I didn't make a big deal about it intentionally. But I would talk to them in person and in private about what specifically they did that was so helpful, and they really preferred that, and it was great. I had another colleague that I worked with who their idea of appreciation and recognition was the example I gave before, right? Big presentation, audience full of people, the whole thing. One thing that is true about appreciation and recognition is that everybody wants something that's authentic, that's genuine, and that's heartfelt. Money and or awards are important for some folks, not so important for others. The status and feeling valued are really important for most people at some level. Status doesn't necessarily mean a high GS grade, but the feeling that who you are, what you provide is valued and appreciated, that means a lot. Training opportunities, detail opportunities, and a variety of work opportunities are also things that fill that appreciation recognition void for some people, where they feel like their needs aren't being met. Job satisfaction, being in a job that you find very satisfying, feeling respected, and then having additional opportunities. Those are also things that feel for some. All right, we're back to the audience participation portion. I see Nick. Looks like Nick's hand went up first. So go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so
Nick was quick.
When I was actually really worried about leaving my last job. It was I liked the job a lot. I worked for this nonprofit up in Loveland, Colorado, and we did a bunch of native plant work, and I did the invasive plant management side of things. But yeah, I was worried about talking to the director about leaving. I thought I was gonna be upset. They just gave me a nice raise, but I've always wanted to work in like natural areas and go back to work for the Forest Service because I used to work for them before. And yeah, on my last day, they all wrote me a really nice card, and I was like, wow, this is really all that I want out of things. And I actually felt very appreciated and respected, and yeah, it was just a nice feeling. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. All right, thanks. Now, Elena.
Hi. Yeah, so I was gonna actually tell a story about my roommate, but she's coming home soon, so I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, my coworker, she's one of those people who kind of like forgets their lunches sometimes, and we were doing archaeology field work, so like it can get really intense, and you definitely need calories to keep yourself going. And I'm one of those people who just like, I'm a giver. I make food all the time. I love to cook, and I don't have any problem like giving food and like sharing and stuff.
Where did
So,
you say you were at, Elena? Where'd you say you were at? Next
well,
time I visit.
oh yeah, no, I'm in South Carolina. So,
Okay, okay. Dang it.
yeah, I made this pasta salad. It's pretty good, but I was feeling kind of insecure about it. And I brought my friend some food because I knew she wouldn't have lunch because she just kind of does that sometimes. So I brought her some food, and then she ate it and didn't say anything about it. And I was sitting there and I was just like, "Do you like it?" Like all I wanted was that like verbal recognition that what I made was good. And then it kind of hurt my feelings. And then later on, I talked to her about it, and I was just like, "Hey, like I was kind of insecure about that like pasta salad, like was it good?" And she was like, "Yeah, it was delicious." And I was like, "Okay, well, I kind of need that verbal affirmation sometimes. Like, would you mind like telling me like if it's good or bad? Like it doesn't, you don't have to lie to me, but it would just be nice if you would give me that." And then she was just like, "Yeah, for sure." And now she's really good at communicating her feelings. So
Aw,
I know.
look at you. Look at you
Yay.
doing your own little training right there.
Yep.
That's
I try my
awesome.
best.
Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing. Okay, Hannah and then Devin.
Hi. So my example is I used to work on trail crews, and I was in AmeriCorps, and we would work really hard and not get paid very well. And I remember one thing that made it a lot better, even when it was a really difficult day, was that every morning before we would go out, our trail crew leader would look at us with complete sincerity, and it was the same words every time, but she would tell us, "Thank you so much for your hard work yesterday. We accomplished some great stuff, and I really appreciate all of you." And it was really simple and quick, but it was a great way to start the day, and it made us feel appreciated.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And all of you future supervisors and leaders here in the Forest Service or wherever, remember that. Little things mean a lot to people. Okay, Devin, you're up.
I used to work at Foot Locker and Best Buy and stuff like that in my city, and we have a very large Hispanic population, and like most of those Hispanic people don't really speak English real well, and so the fact that I go out of my way to try to communicate with them, they show a lot of appreciation for it.
Awesome. That's great. All right, so that was quick. So I'll go ahead and let you go, Wes, even though I said that we're going to move on. I'm going to let you go. Nobody else until the next time. So
Thank you.
there's going to be more. Go ahead.
To give a quick account, there was about 7 months ago, I was working at Walmart, my old store. So there's a period of time where I was working about 36 hours a week doing school full time. So they got to a point where I got like really tired. I ended up getting out of class. I basically went to the library and fell asleep and missed my entire shift. Yeah, it was bad. So I went to work the next day. My store manager calls me up, tells me I might have to fire you for missing the shift and everything. I went back and told all my coworkers, my manager, and everything because I was really bummed about it. And they all took it upon themselves to like all go up to my store manager and like talk to him about how much they enjoyed working with me and how much they appreciated my work, especially since I had to stay until about 3 o'clock in the morning for them. So I was working essentially 12-hour shifts. And about 45 minutes later, my manager calls me back up and he tells me, "Hey, you're lucky you're a hard worker and he needs to really like appreciate you." So he's like, "I'm gonna let you off the hook here." I was like, "Oh, thank you."
Oh boy. See, so hard work does pay off, people. Hard work does pay off, even if it doesn't always feel like it at the time. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Wes. All right, next slide. Great. Okay, so now we're to fairness, also known as equity. And here's the thing about fairness and equity. I will tell you, as a former, let's see, I think I have somewhere in the 12 to 15 years of experience doing civil rights and EEO work or related work, as well as outside the Forest Service. I do a fair amount of diversity and equity and inclusion work. And if any of you like looked me up on LinkedIn or internet or whatever, you'd also see that I've been facilitating race talks dialogues for, well, since 2012, so for 10 years as well. And I will tell you this, when it comes to fairness and equity, most civil rights and EEO complaints are this issue. People not feeling like they're being treated fairly, like they're being treated equitably because of, you know, like non-merit factors. And generally, if it's the EEO, then they feel like one or more of those reasons is because of, you know, their an EEO basis that they feel is going on, like their race, their gender, their nationality, their religious affiliation, you know, their sexual identity, all the different things, right? All the different EEO things. There's fairness and equity that are at the root of that particular complaint. Also, this is the same for union grievances. Union grievances are typically because people feel like, you know, something that they have a right to that's in that collective bargaining agreement, you know, that their union negotiated, is not being addressed or isn't being followed, or management is doing unfair labor practices, or something unfair is happening, or something inequitable is happening, and they feel like it's covered, that thing that is not being done right is in the collective bargaining agreement. So most union grievances also have this as an issue. A lot of workplace conflicts have some level of this fairness, equity narrative. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of people would think that this is going to be something that is more likely to happen for people who are not supervisors, leaders, managers, etc., because they got power, they got influence, they can, you know, they can do some things. That's all true. And you all might be surprised that about half of the contacts that I get from folks are from managers, leaders, and supervisors. And a number of times, a good percentage of times, they feel like they're not being treated fairly. Sometimes they feel like they're not being treated fairly by their subordinates, who aren't respecting them, who aren't doing what they say, who aren't following through on the things that they're supposed to do for their work, who are using the fact that it's challenging to get rid of somebody as a way to make that manager or supervisor's work life miserable, or I should say, or they feel like they're not getting supported from their upline leadership, from their bosses, from their managers, from, you know, all the way up to chain of command. And so it's been very surprising to me how many of managers, leaders, and people in positions where they have subordinates, they often feel like they're the ones who are not being treated fairly. They're given these unreasonable targets to meet that don't take into account the reality of the situation that we all find ourselves. So this is from a book that I'm reading right now. And so for transparency purposes, I want to let you all know that some of the work that we do when we're meeting with folks that are having challenges or difficult things going on is, you know, we refer them to other resources, especially when we maybe aren't the right resource for them. And because of things going on in my own personal life, I'm seeing a licensed clinical therapist. You know, we've had like 4 appointments now, and I find that it has been really helpful for me. And it also is probably really helpful that I'm practicing what I preach sometimes for folks. But I'm also like looking for books and trainings and things like that, where I can help myself too. And then this one book that I've been reading recently, I'm just going to read a couple of lines from it. Everyone is struggling. Sometimes our marriages and relationships are a mess. Sometimes our health is a disaster, physically and mentally. We've lost loved ones, experienced financial stress, and we're exhausted and or angry all of the time. We have so many labels and opinions, yet we're all dealing with more and more pain. I know because I've lived this too. The path to healing our deepest hurts and changing our lives is an ancient one involving just 5 steps repeated over and over again. Step 1, own your stories. Step 2, acknowledge reality. Step 3, get connected. This is something that's really, really saved me in a really, really hard time. Step 4 is change your thoughts. You have the ability to change your thoughts. That's something you have control over. And step 5, change your actions. Now, these steps are simple, but also very hard to do. Most people never try. Of those who do try, few keep going. But if you think about this and you're intentional about it, you can experience deep grief followed by restoration. You can have peace, laughter, great relationships and connections, deep sleep without medication, joy, and so much love. So living a whole, well, resilient, and connected life is possible. You can own your past and change your future starting today. And so the name of the book is Own Your Past, Change Your Future. It's by this double PhD named Dr. John Deloney. So, all right, I just threw that in. Look, no charge. Okay, so back to fairness and equity. It's often due to real and or perceived biases, and it's influenced by assumptions, emotions, life experiences, evidence, facts, fears, and perceptions. And then the last comment is that it may be felt by leadership and management as well. All right, so now audience participation time again. Somebody, I see Sarah Pesquera has raised her hand. I don't even know if I said that right, but
Close,
go ahead.
Pesquera. Thank you.
Pesquera, okay.
Mhm.
All right, go ahead, Sarah.
My former career in film production is a predominantly male industry and also a big union industry. And my role in particular was non-union, predominantly female held. And I was in charge of budgets, so I had preview to everyone's rate. And I often saw the women's rates for several years just kind of lower than the male's rates. And after COVID, I saw the male counterparts to me get raises where I was not allowed raises. So it became a, slow battle of trying to pick and choose of how to increase my rates, encourage my subordinates to also ask for raises. And it's an ongoing thing, and I've experienced that, to say.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that, and it sucks. And the reality of the fact is that there are going to be things that happen, to all of us that suck. And we try to, we got to figure out a way to try to deal with those and not let those things have the upper hand. And for Forest Service related work things, challenges, conflict management prevention can be an excellent place to go to try to get some assistance. All right, thank you for that, Sarah, appreciate it. So the next one is trust. When it comes to trust is the foundation of any relationship, including working relationships. When something happens, trust can be broken or damaged, Or if there isn't trust to begin with, it might not actually be created. However, if team members, coworkers, colleagues respect each other enough to listen and allow the other person to be heard, conflict can be avoided and a mutual understanding can be reached. One of the things that, people who do conflict management work know is that people really want to be heard and acknowledged. It doesn't mean that they have to agree, but if they can be heard and acknowledged, and they can, have a space where each of them can hear each other out and not just wait for the other one to take a breath so that they can, could jump in and share their part. If they can listen to each other, listen for understanding, not necessarily for agreement, then a lot of times what can happen is you get to these underlying issues of where needs aren't being met. And then often those needs, you can figure out a way to get those needs met. And then the presenting positions where there was conflict are no longer the most important thing. And people are been able to make, a path forward, a way forward. Now, I used to believe that trust was something that was developed over time, and I still believe it is. But I was listening to another one of my CMPC colleagues doing a presentation, and they talked about, when you think about it, trust is something that we are all born with. So think of a baby. When a baby is born, it's basically helpless. That baby has to trust its parents, caregiver, whoever, to feed it, to clothe it, to change it, to clean it, to do everything for it. And can't even talk to say what they want. So I have to acknowledge, yes, there's a lot of trust in the beginning. And what can happen is, as we live our lives and have our work experiences, we can lose some of that trust. The trust can be broken and it can be difficult to regain. If you're in a situation, a work situation, and you feel like, trust has been broken, it's challenging to navigate, it could be hard to do it on your own if you're not a professional. It can even be hard to do if you are a professional. However, some of these kinds of cases, conflict management and prevention, can be helpful for you and whoever it is you're having conflicts with. And even if it's not the CMPC, we may be able to give you some tools, some training, some things like this that can help you sort of self-mitigate some situations. All right, so who wants to give me an example of trust? I see Gregory, and it looks like Sarah, you still have your hand up. You got to go already, so take that hand down. All right, so I hope it's okay for me to tease you, Sarah. I'm just, doing my thing here. Okay, Gregory first, and then I see Ryan. Go ahead, Gregory.
Hi. So I used to have a job as being a high school science teacher at charter school for about 2 years. It was kind of like within the COVID time. But the one thing that really surprised me was, I was the youngest teacher within that school. Everyone else was like a little bit, 20 years, 30 years older than me. But a lot of the high school and middle school kids trusted me more than anyone else within the school, just because of my age, and I could interact with them better. And a lot of times most of their problems, I got more, or I heard most of their issues or anything else from them rather than anyone else. So I would be more in the know-how than most other people. So I just thought that was interesting how, even though I was the youngest one, I was able to connect on their level more than anyone else, so they trusted me more.
Absolutely. That's a great example. Thanks for sharing, Gregory. Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm a rock climber, and a lot of the time you're climbing, you really have to put your trust in like your partner, because they need to be paying attention to you 100%, like when you're up there. And just having that like communication and trust in the people that you're with to like be responsible for, in some situations, your life is of utmost importance when you're doing that.
Outstanding. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So normally, if we had more time, I would go through this exercise where I ask each of you to share in the chat how much you feel is communicated through tone, through body language, and the actual words that you used. And the total has to add up to 100%. Okay, the total has to add up to 100%. And I would normally ask you to just go ahead and put that in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to do that. You can do it if you want. I'm going to show you the answer here in a couple of seconds. But a lot of people, and you got to put 3 numbers in, 3 numbers that add up to 100. Like how much percent you think is tone, how much percent you think is body language, and how much percent you think is the actual words. All right, so I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and do it. Okay. All right, good. Jay, I see a couple. I see another. 33, 33, 33. All right, good. All right, I consider that engagement. Here's the answer. Here's the answer. Now, I will say this. This is prior to COVID. This is prior to everybody going on virtual, mediums to interact with folks. And I'd be curious if they did the same study again, if it would come out the same way, since we have been communicating differently. But I suspect that still body language would be the predominant thing that people actually see, followed by tone. The percentages might change some, but the interesting piece is that words are actually the smallest percentage of how things are communicated. So just something for you to think about. Next slide, please. All right, so if we had longer time, I would go through and give you some snippets from each one of these different topics under communication, because as you can imagine, communication is big. Linda had shared some things in her presentation, and here's what I am going to give you, since we don't have time to go through all of these, is I'm going to give you the fact that I have at least half a dozen or so times that I've given this presentation before where it's been recorded. Yes, there's some recorded versions of this where I go through all of this stuff. And since I don't have time to do it now, I'm going to direct you to the Conflict Management and Prevention Center SharePoint site, where those recordings that I've done in the past are available, and you can check them out, get all the specific information, and you can and there's other, let me tell you, so it's not just me having stuff there. Linda's got some great stuff there too, some trainings and webinar presentations, and other CMPC managers do too. All right, so Linda gave a version of this. I kind of tailored it to go with my presentation, which is when you look at the common trends and issues in the Forest Service, communication, it really is the biggest one, whether that's miscommunication, inappropriate communication, lack of communication. And sometimes people don't realize this, but sometimes too much communication is a problem. How is that? What are you talking about? That's crazy talk. No, the ways that too much communication can be a problem is micromanaging. Micromanaging is a type of too much communication. Also, gossip is a type of too much communication, right? Where there's just too much, it's not appropriate. So, and then in the interpersonal conflicts and disputes area, that's where respect, trust show up. And I would even add fairness in there as well. But fairness can be more than just interpersonal, right? So then there's always performance appraisals and conduct concerns that are regular trends, a part of the trends and issues in the Forest Service. All right, so if you get this PowerPoint presentation, which for any of you who are interested, I suggest you do get that, because what you will see some of this information besides the additional stuff that you'll get if you go check out one of my previous presentation webinar things that I've done. That's me all buttoned up and, you know, suited and booted, whatever. And then that other one was me, you know, halfway through the pandemic on a Friday where we were doing training. I just decided to make it casual Friday. And I wanted to come in, and that's somebody took a picture, and then everybody liked it so much. I'm like, I'll just add it to my presentation so people can see the other side of me. This is my contact information for any of you that are in Region 6 or doing work for the research station, the Pacific Northwest Research Station. And then the next slide should be the one, questions. I'm going to ask if anybody wants to volunteer to share an experience of super positive communication or at a time where communication wasn't done really well. And then also open it up for folks if they have questions for Linda and I. All right, Jeffrey.
Hey, I was gonna share an example of where communication wasn't done really well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at my previous job, I was fortunate to work at a nonprofit that was kind of between several different parks in the downtown area of my city, which was, you know, great because I had a window and looked over them. But the downside of that was that the city liked to have big festivals next to them, and it would cause a whole lot of traffic, right? So on one particular day, I had some family members that were from out of town and were coming to visit me, and I told them specifically, do not come and see me at the office because you're going to get stuck on traffic. And a lot of times the police just go ahead and shut down the area because it's causing a problem, right? Well, guess what they did? They did exactly what I told them not to do, and then got upset that they were stuck in traffic, and then tried to coordinate me with a different spot to where to go to. And I told them, no, that's not going to be a good plan. You need to come over there. And then I didn't hear from them again, so I went off to my plan because I thought they'd be like, oh yeah, he knows what he's doing, he's the one that lives here. Nope. Then they got mad at me. They didn't, because I wasn't where they said I should be. I'm like, and they just could not figure out why I was so upset with them, because it was like, yeah.
What a great example. And that happens in the job. Okay.
Yeah.
That happens regularly.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that, Jeffrey. All right. Who was next? Was it Jacob or Valerie? I didn't see who was second there. Okay, Jacob.
Okay, so I'm going to do the opposite and tell about a time when communication was good. So I've been in the volunteer fire service now for a couple of years. I just got out of it to come out here. And if anybody's ever been around a part of the fire service, communication is key, just, as a part of our jobs. So there was this one time, a big county on Arkansas, that's where I was doing our thing. We got a call for a structure fire. Now back there, you have 7 or 8 departments go to it. So you have 7 or 8 different little systems trying to do their own little thing. And so we all kind of communicated what we needed. We all got to where we needed, things to go. We all got assignments done and everything like that. And in the end, we ended up saving, I think, 2 kids or something like that from before the house went up. So it was just something where, getting to know where everybody's needs were ended up, working out in the end. So.
Oh, I love that example. And that's also an example, I think, like Linda and I and the other CMP managers, one of the things we really strive to do at the very beginning is to find out where people's needs are so that we can help them address those needs. Not that we're personally going to fix them, maybe we can help them focus attention on it and think about what options they have and go through maybe different scenarios, role play with them and things like that. That's a great example. Thank you. Okay, Valerie.
All right, so I'm going to explain a time where communication was not the best. And it was at my old job where I communicated with my job that I was leaving and I was planning on leaving after I was graduating. And that was perfectly fine. But my coworker had just started a couple months after I did, and they were just unhappy. They were very unhappy with the position. They were unhappy with their situation. And they always communicated with me about their unhappiness. And it made it very difficult because they were planning on leaving and I knew I was leaving, and then I knew they were leaving. And so now we were going to be understaffed, or we're going to leave the organization understaffed. And so I felt very guilty knowing that they had told me all of this, but I wasn't sure whether or not it was my position to tell my supervisors that this person was leaving because they already had it in their mind they were applying for jobs. It turned out working out pretty well. They got a job and they ended up moving on, but I feel like the situation could have been handled a lot better. And it just really was uncomfortable that I was put in the middle of it.
You know, you may not know this, Valerie, but that scenario that you just shared is playing out all over the Forest Service, coast to coast. There's similar situations where people have decided to retire, or maybe they've decided to move into another position. Or, you know, one of the things about this pandemic that it did do is it has everybody looking at their lives and deciding what really is the priority here, right? What really is the priority that we need to, you know, that I need to address. Because the pandemic makes you think about that kind of thing, where maybe otherwise, if there wasn't something like that, you wouldn't necessarily go there. And then what that ends up doing is creating havoc on the different work sites and locations, because there's HR is understaffed. Yet, does anybody believe me that HR is understaffed? They don't have enough people doing all the things there. And then some HR folks retired, some HR folks moved on to other things. And some of the ones who were there may not have as many years of experience and knowledge. And it's one of those kind of functions where it takes a certain amount of time to really understand all the different ways of doing things in different situations and whatever. And so when HR is in that kind of situation, it actually ends up impacting every single work group that is trying to get anything done through HR. And there's a lot of other places where that's playing out in the Forest Service too. So as you all go out there, you know, and are helping folks and doing things, just realize that there is an undercurrent of this that's going on that folks are dealing with. And you may feel like you've ended up like sort of plopped into the middle of it. And that's only because you have, but that doesn't mean you can't still make the best of it. You can't still learn from experience. You can't still give your all and do the best that you can. And remember, there's everything in life falls under two categories. One category is those things that you can actually do something about, that you have some influence, you have some control, you have the ability. The other category is those things that we can't really control the pandemic. You can get yourself vaccinated, boosted, wear a mask, you can do that, right? You can do safe things, wash your hands, 6 foot distance, all the things, you can do all that, but that's all stuff you're doing for you. You can't affect like the globalness of everything else that's going on. And so remember, when you think of those two categories, things you can do something about, and then everything else, try not to spend a huge amount of your time in those areas that you really can't do a dang thing about, because all you will end up with is frustration and disappointment. So try to focus on those things, those areas where you can do something, where you can have an impact, where you can have influence. And remember, you never know what's going on in somebody else's life too. Somebody may be acting like a pain in the butt because they've got stuff going on. Remember the saying, hurt people hurt people. And it's not always intentional, and yet it's very often true. Yes, and right Right. And if you're in a situation where I like Jenna's comment, remember, you don't have to take it either, right? If you're in a situation where the things that you can't control are making your life miserable and you just can't live that way, you always have options. Might not be options you want to pursue, but we always have options. And if you're not sure what your options are, call your CMPC manager. They can help you with that.